Sorry, my mic was muted. I'm Brittany. I'm a developer advocate at Contentful, and I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to talk to you about how to connect Contentful to your project. Before we get into it, I want to explain what Contentful is in case you haven't used Contentful before. Before I started working at Contentful, I had actually never heard of Contentful. Contentful is an API-first content management system, so similar to WordPress and other systems like that, where it's a place to store and manage your content. The difference about Contentful is that we are developer first, so we have REST and GraphQL APIs for you to use. We also, one of our main features is structured content that you organize. So if you ever use WordPress, you know that you start off with pages and posts. In Contentful, you start off blank. It could be whatever you want. You organize your content however you want. And all of our content gets served to you via JSON, so you can use it on any platform. You don't have to worry about HTML being mixed in with your content. You can use your content anywhere. Another feature of Contentful is that you can also customize the UI and also the functionality to meet your needs. So for instance, I'm going to show you later some default fields that we have. You might look at a field and be like, I really wish I could add this feature to this field, where you can. Our fields are all open source. You can customize the fields if you want. You can also create things we're calling apps that can add additional functionality. You can connect to other services like Dropbox or other APIs using an app. And we have an app marketplace where you can see all those examples. And the last major feature of Contentful is that you can use any programming language or framework with Contentful. So today we're using Vue, which is actually my favorite front-end framework. And you can use any language you want with Contentful since it's a headless CMS. So that's like a really quick overview of Contentful. I don't want to spend too much time on what it is because I want to get into the project. So now I'm going to show you how to set up Contentful. And I'm going to be walking through the exercise here that's manage products with Contentful. So if you miss something, it's on this page. So don't worry about it if you miss a step. You can definitely find all the steps on this page. So right now, this page here, I'm inside of my Contentful account. I'm signed in, and I'm in a space. In Contentful, a space is kind of similar to a GitHub repo, where it's just a place to store something. So our space stores our data, and you can add additional settings. You can add additional users, things like that. So once you're in your space, you're going to want to build your content model. So I'm going to click on content model up here at the top. And this is where I'm going to decide what my content is going to be structured. So for this project, we're going to use products. So I'm going to click on design your content model. And by the way, if you already played around and you already have a content model or content type in your content model, you can still add the product content type to that. You can just add it to whatever you have going on. So I'm going to add product here. And just so you know, this name here is for inside of the Contentful UI. This is the name you will see in the UI. This API identifier is what you will use in your code to say, hey, I want to get the products. And you cannot change this API identifier in the UI. So just be careful when you type it. You can't change it in the UI. You could change it with the API, but not inside of the UI. So I'm going to go ahead and create this content type. And now I need to add fields to my content type. So for our project, we have a few fields we need to add. So this pop-up here are all of our default fields that we have already in Contentful. And as I said, with our app framework, you can add custom fields or you can edit the current fields. So the first one we're going to add is the name of the product. So I'm going to use the text field because that matches what the name of the product might be. So I'm going to add name here. And the same with the field ID. This is going to be what the API uses. And this is the internal name you'll see in the Contentful UI. I'm going to leave it as short text, and I'm just going to create. And I'm going to quickly make the rest of the fields. So we also have a summary. So I'm going to use text again. And I'm going to type summary. And I'm going to use long text this time because we want a little bit more text. So you can see here in short text, the maximum of 256 characters. Long text is a maximum of 50,000 characters, which is a lot. So I'm going to choose long text for this one. And I'm going to go ahead and create that. And then for price, I'm going to use the number field and type price. And for this one, we need to use decimal. So I'm going to click on that. And also for this one, we have in the guide to add help text. So far, I've been creating each field, but you can also create and configure. And this will open up some options for you to modify this field a little bit more. So we have some validations. So say you only want certain values or you don't want any values to be repeated. You could choose that. You can also add default values. I'm going to go to appearance here. And in appearance, we can add some help text. So the help text we need to add is price in cents here. so that we know when we're entering this number, it needs to be the cents for the number, for the price. You can also change the look of it. So maybe if this is a rating, I can have a star rating. I could change to radio, drop down. I'm just going to leave it as a number editor for now and confirm. The next one we're going to add is description. So back to text. We're going to type description and do long text again. Create that. And the last one we're going to add is image. So we have this media field here. I'm going to click on that and add image. And we're going to allow multiple images to be added to this field. So you could choose only allow one, or you could do multiple. And I'm going to go ahead and create that here. So these are the fields we're going to add for now. Later on, you can add more if you'd like. One other thing I'm going to do is in the name field, I'm going to go back to settings. And here you can choose that this field is the entry title. So I'm going to say yes for this. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to say yes so that inside of the Contentful UI, it's going to decide the name is the title of my product. And that just makes it easier to search for things. So now I have all of my fields for my content type of product. I'm going to click on save. And this saves my content type. And if I go back to my content model, we can see product is here. So you can add up to 48 product types on the community plan, which is the free plan. And yeah, so that's how you create a content type. And when I make a project, I spend most of my time trying to figure out how to organize my content. I feel like that's where you spend a lot of your time. And I think the best way is to just go into UI and choose the fields you want and see what the validations are, see what appearances you can do, but also do via code using the API. So if you're a person that likes the terminal, likes to do code, you could do all of that via the API. But I think it's easier when you're first getting started to do things in the UI first. Okay, so now we have our content type entry for the content type. So we need to add product. So I'm going to go to content here, and this is where all of your content entry. Uh-oh. Oh, okay, there we go. I'm going to add a new entry. Sorry, I think my internet might have stopped for a second. Okay. There we go. I'm going to add a new entry for a product. So I am going to add one of the hot sauces that we already have. So if you're following along, just put whatever in here, and you can update it later. So I'm going to add in one of the hot sauces that are in the project. For the price, it's going to be $9.99. And again, this is price in cents. And then the description. I've added all of my items, and now I'm going to add an image. So when you have an image, you can add existing media. So if I already had uploaded images, they would be in this media section here, but I don't have any images. And then you can add new media from the entry, which is really handy. So I'm going to add new media. So now I'm in the asset editor. And I'm going to just use the name of the product as the title and description. And what a lot of people use when they use Contentful is the description they use for alt text for accessibility. And then I'm going to add the file, which I have on my desktop. Waiting for it to process. And one neat thing about Contentful and the assets is you can edit the file inside of Contentful. So you can crop it, you could change the size and things like that inside of Contentful, which is really neat. So I'm going to publish this asset. So now if I go back, I have my asset in my image field, and it's published. So now I have all of the items I want. Product, it's publish. So now if I click on content here, seems like 2 of them were accidentally created. Let me delete these. Okay, here is the product that I created. And I can click back in. I can look at my content. If I make a change, Contentful automatically notices that I changed something. I can unpublish it here and whatnot. So that is basics of creating a content type on Contentful and creating an entry. let's actually get our, oh no. Let's go to our code and actually get our content showing in our local project. So I already have the code on my computer. This is the example code, and I'm on the start branch. So before we get started, we need to actually tell our code, hey, this is my Contentful account. So we're going to need, in the .env example file, you can see we need Contentful space, and we need Contentful public access token. So to find that information, you head to your Contentful account. If you go to settings, API keys, if you haven't done it before, you click on add API key, and then it will create this section here. And in here will be your space ID and your content delivery API access token. That's the access token that you need. The content delivery API access token will return published content only. And it's also read only. So if other people see your access token, that's totally OK. There's also this content preview API, which will give you published and draft content. Both of these read only, totally fine if people see them. There is another one here, content management token. You do not want anybody to see that. That one needs to be secret, just in case you end up using that. So back in here, I need the space ID to go into my .env file. You also need to put your URL here from your personal project, and then your Stripe secret. So I already created my .env file, so I'm just going to drag it in to my project really quick. Okay, so I already have my .env file. So, and the other thing we're going to need to do is in your Nuxt config file, if you scroll down to line 23 and 24, the Contentful space and Contentful public access tokens were hard-coded. So we just need to update that to use your .env variables instead. So for line 23, instead of this Contentful space string, I'm going to do process.env .nuxt Contentful space. And for this one, I'm going to do the same thing and do Nuxt Contentful public access token. So what we needed to update was in your .env file, make sure to rename it .env. You need to put your space ID and your content delivery access token. You need to have this URL and a Stripe secret. And in your Nuxt config, if you want to, replace it with your .env variables or replace it with your actual values. And with both of those, now your project should be pulling in Contentful. So I am going to run my project. Let me go ahead and open. Okay, so I'm running my project, but remember in my Contentful account, I only had one hot sauce. I only had this black garlic one. There's one more thing you need to do to make sure that Contentful data is coming into your project. So if we go back to the code, if you go into the stores folder to product.store, and you scroll down to line 36, this function right here is fetching the data from the API products file. So remember earlier you saw in the data folder this products.json file. So this is all of the default products that you see when you start the project. And this is actually what the JSON looks like that you get from Contentful. So this is the data that the project's using right now because of this code. So I'm going to, I already put the code in here. Let me just do this. So this is the code that we need to add. I'll just explain what's happening here. So here we're using Contentful, and then we're using the Contentful JavaScript library to get entries. And we are narrowing it down to only get the entries with the content type product. So remember when I made the content type name, the API identifier was product. So we're saying, hey, give me all the entries from Contentful with the content type product. And then when entries come back, there's an items array, and that's why you're narrowing it down to items. and that is going to give me the products. So if I save this, and then go back to, I might have to restart my server. There we go. So I save this. Now I have my one product from my Contentful. So now it's connected to my Contentful account. And just to make sure, I'm going to go back to my Contentful account. And I'm going to go to content. And I'm going to edit this product. I'm just going to put hello at the beginning. Publish that change. And then if I go back and refresh, there we go. Hello. So now my project is connected to Contentful. It's very usually to grab your data from Contentful. So I'm going to go and undo that hello real quick. So that's great. Now the content is connected to Contentful. You can add more fields if you want to. You can modify things, whatever you would like. One additional thing we're going to do is you're using Stripe with this product. So we're going to add a webhook so that when you add a product to add it as a product. So in settings, we have this section for webhooks. And in general, is just an action, something that happens. So like, for example, if something happens in Contentful, like you publish a post, you delete a post, you want something to be triggered in another system. So in this case, we want when we publish a post in Contentful, we want to add a product into Stripe. So I already created the Stripe webhook here. To update about here to work. So the first thing you're going to do is add a name, and this is just for you, an internal name for you. You'll be the only one to see it in the Contentful UI. For the URL, it'll be the Stripe API URL, and then you also need to check this check mark to say it's active. And then for this webhook, we only want it to trigger when an entry is published. So you can click select specific triggering events. And we have all these different events you can choose from. So you could do it if an entry is created, saved, etc. But we just want when an entry is published. And then the next thing you have to do is not only do we want when an entry is published, but only the products. Because if you continue with the project, you could add other content types. You could add a page content type. You can add whatever you want. So we only want this webhook to trigger when an entry is published, but only if that entry is a product. So in this dropdown, you would choose content type equals product. And again, this is that API identifier. And then the main thing you need to connect to Stripe is to add a header. You're going to add a secret header here. And in the key, you're going to add authorization. And then the value is going to be bearer and then your Stripe secret API key. So in this document here, let me show where it shows it here. So it'll be bearer like this, and then your Stripe API token, which will be a really, really long string of random numbers and letters. And you'll put that there, and they'll say it's secret here. So I have mine in here, but it's secret. Then you're going to want to change the content type to URL encoded. And the last thing you need to do is change the payload or customize the payload. So Stripe needs the content to be in a certain structure. So we're basically saying, hey, this is how the content needs to be structured for Stripe to accept it. And this code right here, this JSON, is in this file as well here. So you can just copy this. And that will be the end of, that's everything you need for the webhook. So then once you publish things, they should show up in Stripe as products. And one other thing I want to talk about is in the original project, there were these like fire emojis here for like the hot level, the heat level of the product. And I want to show you how to add another field. So to figure out like where that came from, I just searched the project for like heat level. And I saw that in, actually, let me just search here. Where was it? Here we go. So in the product heat component, here's a list of all the product heats: hot, medium, and mild. So let's go ahead and add another field so that we can add these heat values. So I'm going to go back to Contentful, go to my content model, click on product. And my field, I'm going to do a text field and add heat level. Oops, actually, And for this one, I'm going to actually choose list because in the code there's 3, and it seems like there's always going to be just these 3. So we can specify that we only want the value to be one of these 3. So I'm going to choose list here, and I'm going to create and configure. And under validation, I'm going to say accept only specified values. And now I can go back here. So hot, medium, and mild. I'm going to type hot, medium, mild. And I'm pressing enter after I type each one. And I'm also going to go to appearance, and I'm going to change it to text box or checkbox. And also, I'm guessing that you can only have 1 for each hot sauce. So I'm going to say that specify a number of symbols. I'm going to say no more than 1 for each, when you choose a heat level. You can only choose 1. So I'm going to confirm that here and click on save. So now if I go back to my content, I'm going to go back to this hot sauce. And down at the bottom will be my heat level. And I'm going to click on hot. But if I click on medium, I get an error message that says, hey, you can only do 1 item. You could change this error message. So I'm just going to do hot. And I'm going to publish changes. So now if I go back to my project and refresh, you can see the heat level. And yeah, that is a quick overview of how you can add fields. You can add more products here. You can add additional fields. If you add new fields, you're just going to have to go into the components. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the demo. Any questions? I can take them if there are any questions.
Hey, thank you so much, Brittany, for this nice overview and the demo. It was really awesome. I also learned a lot about Contentful. So yeah, I'm sure the audience learned a lot and they were able to follow along as well. So yeah, we do have some questions, but before that, I have a very favorite question of mine, which is, what is your favorite musical? Because you are into musicals and stuff.
That question's so hard because I have a favorite musical for dance, a favorite musical for costumes, I have like 30 favorite musicals. But right now, I would say my favorite is kind of weird musical, but it's based off of, it's called Six. It's based off of Henry VIII's 6 wives. So the British King VIII, he had 6 wives and a lot of them died. And in the musical, they want to make a band, but they can't decide who the leader of the band's going to be. So they decide they're each going to sing a solo. Worst time as Henry's wife gets to be the leader of the band. And that's the musical.
Okay.
So it's a rock musical. It's really funny. People in the cast. So that's my current favorite musical.
Awesome, awesome. I will check it out. And if in the audience someone is interested in musical, do check it out if you haven't already. Okay. So let's take some questions. I think, yeah. So we have a question. Why don't you use a list like drop down? I think this is for the one which you showed with a checkbox. Yeah.
Yeah, you could use dropdown instead. I just put checkbox because I felt like it, but you could use dropdown or the other one, which is like kind of like labels or tags. Basically, you can use either one. Any of those you could use.
Awesome. Yeah. So it's like a personal preference. You could go ahead and use, yeah, whatever suits the need. Uh, so we have another question. Besides the use case you showed for webhooks, what are some other ways you have seen them used?
Oh, wait, I forgot to show something. So if you go to the webhook settings, there's a sidebar that has templates. And so you can see a bunch of examples. So a lot of people use them mostly for like if you have a static site, every time somebody publishes something and have the site build. So we have templates for Netlify, Gatsby already. Also, if you want to start your like deployment process, we have a Travis CI one. So there's like a lot of ways to use the webhooks.
That's awesome. uh, So, okay, we have another question. How does Contentful compare to some other headless CMSs like Storyblock or Butter CMS?
Yeah, I would say we're all pretty similar. Like the main features, like it's headless. You can use whatever programming language. So I would say like check them all out. Typically, all of them have some kind of like starter that you can quickly look at and see if there's like a specific feature that you're looking for, and that can help you choose a CMS. But Contentful's main thing is having your content be usable everywhere on every platform. So I have another presentation where I showed a bunch of examples like Apple Watch apps. You could use content from Contentful, billboards, like there's all kinds of different ways. And also the customization, the app framework I mentioned. A lot of clients have made some like managing inventory inside Contentful. Somebody made an app to create March Madness draft picks. So you can like really extend Contentful. So I think those are some of the differentiators.
That really sounds very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. So, lots of people have actually asked about the webhook portion. So, like, do you mind retouching real quick on the webhook portion?
Yeah. Yeah, so the webhook was basically, oh, I can go ahead and go back. Cool. So in the settings under webhooks, we basically content product in your Contentful space. It'll add a product, and we had to kind of update a bunch of items in here. But basically, for this one, you're saying Stripe API, and then for these things, we wanted to only allow you to publish, only have this webhook trigger when an entry is published. And also in this manage products notion, there are screenshots for each step. There's like 9 things you need to update. So I would like definitely look at the screenshots to see what you need to update. Then the next setting we did was we wanted to make sure to only trigger this webhook when it was a product that was changed, because you can have other content types in your project. And then under headers, you're going to add a secret header, and then you're going to say authorization, and then the value is going to be, go back in here, in Stripe, if you go to developers, API keys, it's going to be the secret one that's hidden. And then you'll save that, and then it's going to show like this, and it's not going to show your actual key, but make sure you put bearer and then your Stripe API token. And then we also changed this URL encoded. And the last thing we updated was the payload, because the Contentful JSON, if you look in here, sorry, if we go back to the project, to the products.json, this is what the Contentful JSON looks like. Let me find. So it looks like this, but in Stripe, we want to organize it a little differently. So that's why we have this custom payload. And when you paste this, just make sure you're not missing anything, because it will give you an error if it's not completely valid JSON. And that's what you need for the, then you're going to want added content. You can go back to your content, unpublish it, and then republish it, and you'll see the product in your Stripe products. Show you.
Yeah, your voice is breaking, I guess, because I'm not able to hear you.
Sorry, my internet is being weird. Here we go. On the side, we have these templates here. So here we have Netlify, Heroku, Vercel for like triggering builds. We have Travis CI, Circle CI for deployments, Slack. So another example of using a webhook, what we have in our Contentful Slack, our community Slack, and our internal Contentful Slack is when somebody publishes a blog post on our website, it'll post a Slack message saying, hey, here's a new blog post, here's a little photo, and then what the blog post is. We have the Twilio one. There's like all kinds in here already. And then you can, of course, create your own custom webhook. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for retouching on that. I think someone also wants to know the part with emoji which you did using the list, I guess. So, uh,
Ah,
yeah.
so my in the default, the data that you start with, I was just looking at the data when I was practicing this talk, and I saw heat level was in here, and it wasn't in here in this file, so we had to add it ourselves. So if you go to content model, back to your product content type, I added heat level. So let me do it again, and I will just not save it. So I did text again, and I did heat level like this, and I did a list. And I chose to do that. I don't know if the original actually is a list. I chose to make it a list because I searched the code. Oh, I lost it. Let me find it. Here we go. I searched the code and I saw that this heat map, hot, medium, and mild are the options. So I'm like, okay, there's probably only 3 that we want to have in the code. So I added a list, and then I have to go back to this because I can only make 1 heat level. So in validation, I said to accept only 1 because you probably only need 1 heat level per hot sauce, because I don't think it can be mild and hot at the same time. So I said accept only specify number of symbols, no more than 1. And then you could change the error message to be like only allow 1 hot sauce, 1 heat level per hot sauce. And then I also accept only specified values, which you don't have to do, but this just keeps people from adding other ones. Because in the code, we only have these 3. So if somebody added a different one, like no spice, we don't have an emoji for it. So it's not going to show up. So that's why I decided to just only specify hot, medium, and mild. And when you're adding stuff, you just press enter to get it to show, which that tripped me up the first time I used it. I was like, why is it not adding my item? You just press enter. And then I also, in appearance, I chose checkbox, but you could choose whatever you want. I just like the checkbox one. And save that. And then in your content, when you go to your product that you created, you can choose the heat level, and then it should show the emojis.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And I hope that people were able to follow more. Yeah. So this is basically depends upon our preferences, right? What we want to have for our data.
Yes.
That's awesome. I see some more questions. So let me pick one. Okay. So, I will hide your screen. Okay. Is there a configuration file to import the C data from Contentful using the CLI?
Yes. Let me actually Google. Let me find it. We have a doc page. We do have a CLI tool. So I mentioned before, like everything I did in the UI, you could do via code. So you have a CLI tool that you can do a lot of things, but you can also import and export content. So this file here, this product file, if you're like, I don't feel like adding these manually to the product. Oh, I keep opening my pets. This file, if you don't want to manually add this, you can just import this whole thing into your Contentful space. And the way you do that is you would install the Contentful CLI. And then once you install it, you can run a Contentful login, and it'll authenticate with your Contentful account. And then you can run commands like import into this space ID, and then the file name that you want to import. So for example, the file name would be products.json. So you go into this folder in your terminal and do the import that way. So you could definitely do it that way if you want to. So here's Contentful space export. You do Contentful space import. These are all of the different flags you can have for exporting and importing here. And this right here under the exporting is an example of a config file in GitHub. So like here, I'll show you. So this is what a config file could look like if you were going to do that. So in the docs is under tutorial CLI import export.
Okay. We will also, for the audience, we will also share this link in the chat. So you can get easy access to it. Uh, Thank you so much, Brittany, for this one as well. So there is another question. Uh, is there any upsert method in webhook? Stripe is not allowing edit of a product.
If you mean update, maybe.
Yeah, not sure what upsert means.
Yes, you can you could change it here to update. Um,
Okay, maybe I'll just keep your screen
yeah.
on. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, it's
In
fine.
the settings under URL, you can change here, so it doesn't have to be post. But that
Mhm.
might be a question for Stripe. I'm not sure. But you can change it to so that's updating something instead of just creating it.
Okay, so I hope that this answered the question. If not, you can the person who asked it, you can still go ahead and ask in the mentors channel or the specific Discord channels for the products. So yeah, I hope this answered the question. And I think there's one more question. Let's take it as a last question. Uh, does it support multilingual content, or would you how would you go about configuring it? Okay.
Yes, actually, Contentful is a German company. So from the start, they've always had multi-language. So in your content model, actually in your settings, oops, in your settings, under environment settings, there's locales. By default, I think it starts with English. It might, if you're in a different country, it might start with something else. But there's a default one, so I can add a new one here. So you can select from a drop down. So let me go to, I'll just do French. And then I'm going to save this. So you add in whatever locales that you want. You can have more than one. And you always have to have a default, by the way. You can't just delete any of them. You have to have at least one. And then in your content model, I'll go to my name settings. And on the first page, there's enable localization of this field. So that will let you now have two different languages. So I'm going to confirm this, save this. So now when I go to my entry, I can click on, oh, sorry, I'm going too fast. On the sidebar, if you scroll down to translation and click on change, I can click on French, save that. And now for this field, so I only checked it for this field. Now I can have the French and the English. And then in the API, I don't have an example really, but like if I go back to that webhook payload, I can show you. In the API, for English, it'll have ENUS. So then for French, it would have whatever the French one is. So that's how you would differentiate it on your front end in the
Yeah.
JSON.
That's super cool and super helpful for sure. Yes. Thank you. Once again, it was super helpful, and we really had a very nice Q&A session. And lots of things to learn from. Thank you so much, and I hope audience has all the questions answered. And as I said again, that you can still go ahead and ask in mentors channel and product channels if you have any more questions. Uh, Brittany, it was a very nice session. Thank you for coming here and teaching us all about it.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun.
Yeah. Have a nice day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.